So, welcome to Walk Through Walls with me, Simon Evans, and you,
Gary Sambrook.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Good.
I'm well hydrated. Are you?
I'm well hydrated. Is that going to lead us on to our topic for today?
Tell you what, you. That's why you're paid the big bucks. Today's topic is water. Private Eye is talking all about it. A very funny front page. I'm certainly a fan. Big water industry review announced this week by Sir Jon Cunliffe. He has basically said in his 464-page report that the water industry has got so many problems. It's sort of broken at every level. The summary of his recommendations are to basically put four regulators in the bin, including most importantly the financial regulator Ofwat, and then create a super regulator which includes the environment agencies, environment responsibility, Natural England, and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. Roll it all into one to have one super regulator. He, interestingly enough, although there's a big debate about whether the industry should be renationalised, it was privatised in 1989. Should it be renationalised? A lot of people sort of ideologically say, oh, absolutely, nationalisation, that's the way forward. He said no, that would be way too complicated to unpick it all. He says stick with the private ownership model, interestingly, and then he makes a whole bunch of other recommendations as well. But the most notable one is creating a super regulator to police all sorts of stuff: environment, financial stuff, dividends, customer bills, and so on and so forth. And there's more things besides. It's hugely complex, hugely complicated. But we're going to try and decipher it. The PR aspect as well, what gets said, what gets reported, there's a whole big challenge in terms of storytelling and stakeholder management, which we'll get into. But Gary Sambrook, what's your take on it from a kind of political standpoint?
Well, it's one of these things, isn't it, where these announcements never really please anyone. You always have some kind of, lots of promises are always made, there is always some kind of halfway house and some kind of compromise. That this genuinely doesn't seem to please absolutely anyone at all, other than the Secretary of State, who is probably pleased with himself and announced it. No, for me, the bonfire of quangos and merging all those bodies and regulatory bodies is an absolute dream come true. I mean, some of these organisations, you often wonder why they exist. They make decision making further away from ministers and from Parliament. And as someone who obviously has been there, I want to see MPs being held responsible for the things that they actually do, rather than being held responsible for the things that other people are doing, like a lot of these regulatory bodies. Now, on that face of it, I think that's quite good. However, the people who have been campaigning for this sort of stuff for a long time seem very, very annoyed. I mean, look at Fergal Sharkey. Yeah. Now, Fergal actually went and campaigned in my former constituency last year and walked around with the Labour candidate and said, look, you guys have got to vote Labour because they're going to do X, Y and Z and improve our water and water safety and water quality. And then suddenly, a year later, he is heavily criticising the government and in particular the Secretary of State, who was called for the resignation of.
I read in the Times
that he's gone far enough.
Fergal Sharkey this week, he said this whole report by Mr. Cunliffe, I mean, he had sympathy with Jon Cunliffe, saying that the scope of the review wasn't wide enough. But what he did say was all it amounts to is rearranging the deck chairs, and actually that's an insult to the people who rearrange deck chairs, which is a classic Fergal Sharkey quote, and is further evidence of his very good comm skills. Love him or hate him, he cuts through with his messaging, and he's been a thorn in the side of the industry and will remain a thorn in the side of the industry, holding them to account for all the environmental sins that they commit. Anyway, what I was going to try to do near the top of this session is give a defence of the water industry. So full disclosure, I used to work
in there, didn't you?
Yeah, I used to work for Thames Water for 5 years running their press office. That was way back. I left there at the end of 2013. So obviously it all went downhill when I left. They were up to the old tricks back then. They had Macquarie as the lead shareholder, and even back then Macquarie was sort of ratcheting up the gearing and doing what it does, avoiding tax and all that good stuff. And now, obviously, now we've got Thames Water's got anywhere up to about 20 billion of debt, and it's become what people describe as in a financial doom loop. You know, the interest on it must be staggering every day, and it's just kind of like it's really in a mess. It was in less of a mess back then. But what I would say, just in terms of the whole industry, it was privatised in 1989. There are 16 water and sewerage companies across Britain, and there's a couple of water-only companies as well. But actually what's been achieved across that time is nearly £250 billion worth of investment in new kit, new treatment plants. And obviously people will say, well, they don't work properly because look at the amount of spills to the environment and everything else. That's true, but there has been a huge amount of investment. Customer bills have been kept artificially low. So that's another topic I think we should discuss, because I think customer bills should be higher than they are. Controversial, but actually they should be. But the customer bills have been kept at about an average of 600 quid a year, even now. So that's all with all that investment taking place. And then actually just purely and simply boiling it down, the water industry performs miracles every day. Literally, well, not literally, but I believe it equates to a miracle. Getting this product, which is a pharmaceutical grade product, into a glass. You could give this to a newborn baby and it will be fine. And people will say, oh yeah, but there's trace elements of all kinds of bad things. Yeah, that's true. But for human consumption, it's a pharmaceutical grade product, and it comes through the taps as soon as you turn it on. We'll be paying a fraction of a penny for this because they give it away. It's almost as though you go to a bar, they give you tap water for free because it's just you can't charge for it. So there's that element. And that's across these British Isles that are contain anywhere up to about 70 million people. It's a miracle almost. And
in the global comparisons, when you look at what happens in the UK compared to other countries, actually we fare much better than lots of our comparators from an economic point of view. Economies the same size and in terms of health outcomes, but yet still the criticism in the UK is actually very vivid, and people get very angry about it. And the campaigns to lead to this point where there's been a big announcement have been very critical of the water industry and also the quality in the glass. But when you compare it to other nations, that pharmaceutical grade, what you say, is actually quite good.
So this product is absolutely world class, and there's no you can criticise the water industry for a load of stuff, but you can't criticise it for that. All these bottled water companies say, oh no, you need this or you need a filter. They're frankly just hustlers. This is an amazing product, and it's medical grade. It's awesome. And then all these water and sewage companies, they return the wastewater, what you flush down the loo, back to the environment with a reasonable degree of success. Now, obviously, we'll get into the failures, but it is a 24/7 operation which works by and large pretty well. But that's not to say that there aren't huge failures. And obviously, to summarise the challenge, it's population growth, more extreme weather, so it either rains too much or not enough. And then there's also the financial aspect of it, opaque ownership structures, big dividends going abroad. The new phrase is vulture capitalism. Big exec pay that doesn't go. But the optics of it are bad. And then customer bills are a thing, but again, I think they're artificially low. You compare customer bills in the water sector, the average is 600 quid a year versus electricity bills, or power bills, average 1,850, so more than 3 times. But you don't hear so much. Well, you do. But you hear a lot of complaining about bills going up in the water sector, but that's just I believe just an ideological thing. If you're talking like £2 a day, less than £2 a day for this, that's
I suppose
amazing.
one of the biggest criticisms is not necessarily about the product or the way it gets to us and the quality of it. It's about the sewerage as well, isn't it? The sewerage discharge, the bathing water, and the quality of rivers and all that sort of stuff around us. So that seems to be where they've failed in whether that's a failure of PR or whether it's an actual failure on discharges. Because for me, I remember in Parliament, we know more than we've ever known before about what goes into our rivers.
Yep.
The reason why people are able to leverage criticism at water companies about sewerage is because it's all open data, it's all transparent. We know, like I say, we know more than we've ever known before. When you compare that to other countries who know less, actually we're still doing better than them, but we know that there are traces in there, we know how many discharge, and people worry about that rightfully or wrongly. So do you think that these regulatory bodies which are being merged are going to change that? Do you think that it's going to open it up even more, where people will worry even more, or do you think it will actually try and calm down that and actually resolve the issue?
I got to be honest, I don't want to sound too cynical, but I think merging it into a super regulator makes sense. It will take probably anywhere up to 2 or 3 years. It will involve parliamentary time, blah, 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 blah. You know how that process all works. A bit like the rail industry. They said, we're going to set up Great British Rail, and it sort of just about happened. But again, classically, the first Great British Rail train rolled out of Waterloo, and it had a different logo on it, but actually it was the same rolling stock in it. And then part of the journey was a bus replacement. So it's like literally nothing's changed. And my fear is the same will happen here in water, hopefully not. But I do think, in terms of pollution into the environment, the data, the facts are incontrovertible. You can't get away from it. There is stuff that's going into the rivers. I think I heard on Radio 4 this morning that not a single river in this country is deemed environmentally excellent, like clean bill of health. There's a problem literally everywhere, which reflects really badly on the water industry, because they're meant to be putting back treated wastewater into the environment to look after the environment from which they take their product. So look after the environment, and it will look after the product. That circular thing. But there is undeniably a massive problem. But I think part of the problem is that the technology for detecting contaminants is improving all the time, and it's better than ever before. There's things like PFAS, which is, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's known as forever chemicals, which are kind of sort of stuff that's from the industrial processes and things that are, again, this is getting way into the science and stuff that I don't understand, but there's like chemical compounds which you can't destroy. The only way you can destroy them is by using really complicated processes to remove them from water, and then you have to burn them. Incineration is the only known way of getting rid of it. So there's real problems, but I think they were previously not known about, or people previously didn't even bother looking for them. So we know more now, and so we're finding more problems out, which is, again, it's not minimising the problem, but and then there are some really obvious ones with the storm overflows, CSOs, combined sewer overflows, where there's really heavy rain and it overwhelms the sewage works, and then there are overspill points which they need, because otherwise it backs up into streets and homes. Overflow untreated sewage, which in theory it's heavily diluted by rainwater, and so it's not environmentally problematic. However, tests have shown that when those overflows happen at the frequency they do happen, because these overflow points were designed to go off very, very infrequently after really heavy rain. Now they're going off way, way, way more often than they were planned for millions of hours sometimes a year. And they're putting stuff into the environment, which is bad for it. You got Surfers Against Sewage, all these campaign groups saying, look, we've tested and there's evidence of all sorts. So that is an undeniable failure of water companies and they're failing to keep pace with population growth and the more extreme weather that we're having. So it's really, imagine being a guy running the sewage works, and all of a sudden you're getting a month's rainfall in 24 hours. That didn't used to happen. Or if it did, it was like once in a blue moon.
And a sustained period of dryness like we've had now.
So there's no easy way to do it, because you can have all the regulator can change and have a better, cleaner sort of outlook and integrate the environmental stuff with the financial and economic stuff. But ultimately, you've got the same infrastructure in the same catchment areas of the country, and whether you have it in private ownership, national ownership, let's say you're in Yorkshire, you're going to be getting water through your taps, which has the characteristics of the environment that it comes from in Yorkshire. In London, you're going to get a chalk stream more sort of hard water, tastes great, the Thames water. Right where we are here, you're going to get Severn Trent water, so you're going to get water that comes from the environment, the rivers, Severn Trent, that are in this area and have the characteristics of this geography. And the water's, regionally, the water tastes a bit different for that reason. So, I guess my point I'm making is, regardless of the corporate structures and the ownership, the water you get is from the local area, and it will go through the same water treatment process and then afterwards the wastewater treatment process that it always has done.
I mean, going back to the point you made about corporate structures, I mean, earlier you said that it's reasonably opaque. I mean, the problem is with these guys who run these big water companies that they haven't helped themselves, have they? No. They've got a good product. Yes, there's some failures, but then at the same time, they've been able to structure it and pay dividends, which most people find completely mind-blowing and unreasonable. Now, for years there was always calls for a bonus cap or to scrap bonuses, and then the response was always, well, actually, if you do that, they're only going to just pay themselves more as a salary. Government have done that, they've done it, and then lo and behold, one of the chief execs basically has their salary doubled to make up the difference on the bonus. So it's like, I mean, they don't help themselves. So what do you think could be done differently to try and curb that behaviour, to make them more responsible, to make them look at it a bit more, or otherwise it's not sustainable, is it?
Well, as you say, it is really difficult. It's almost like a perfect scenario for tabloid media headlines, because you've got regional monopolies. These are monopolies. We right here, we cannot choose any other supplier other than Severn Trent because it's a regional monopoly. And electricity, they have different retailers, but and if the water sector were to go into, okay, you change your retailer and you have, I don't know, Octopus Water, let's say, I've made that up, or Private Eye Water, they can be your retailer, you get your bill from them. But you're still getting the water, as I said before, from this geographical area. It'll go through the same infrastructure, treatment infrastructure, and post and pre getting to your house and into your body that it did before. So they're regional monopolies. So we are their customers. We have no choice in the matter, and yet they're privately owned. So that there's this tension within water companies. They're like, let's behave like we're. There's competition. Well, they can pretend, but actually, there's nothing like really being in competition to drive behaviours, and as a result, there's a complacency, and I think there's been a tendency within the sector, within water companies, to where there's a bit of financial stuff, big bonuses, big dividends, rising bills, poor operational performance. There's been a tendency to sort of cover it up and be opaque and quiet about it, and have complicated tax avoiding corporate structures, which are very difficult to understand. So they've sort of taken advantage of that, the sort of the complexity of it, rather than gone, do you know what? Let's us go out to customers and say, if these investors from, I don't know, a pension fund in Canada, or an infrastructure investor in Germany, or whatever it happens to be, if they invest in our company, they put billions of pounds into it, they deserve a return. They don't invest in the company. They need to pay people's pensions or whatever. You don't invest in a company unless you're going to get a return. So, but there's been no transparency about that, no sort of confidence to tell the story and say, look, this is capitalism. This is how it works, and there's nothing wrong with it. But because of the reluctance to actually explain themselves and be transparent, it's like it's allowed the media and customers and the general public to just imagine the reality is even worse than it is. I'm not saying it's good. Because like Macquarie, for example, they ratcheted the debt up on Thames Water 20 years ago, and now it's in a complete basket case situation. And they're doing similar things at Southern. They're putting a lot of debt into it, and it's a really bad model. And again, you come to the Ofwat, the financial regulator. Well, Ofwat has overseen this situation, has allowed it to happen. It's happened on their watch.
Toothless. So
but imagine, right? So Ofwat, and again, I'm not trying to defend Ofwat, but imagine they've got a finite amount of resources. They're a public body, and they are charged with economically regulating these 16 great big money-making billion-pound companies plus the water-only companies, and they're saying, right, you can have this amount of money for this 5-year regulatory period. You can charge bills up to this level. You can have a cost of capital, which is what they can offer investors. Like, if you invest, we can give you this return and no more. So cost of capital was always a thing at the regulatory reviews that the companies argue about, and there are 6 companies at the moment taking Ofwat to the commission. The mergers
and acquisitions.
Merger and acquisition.
They're
challenging the
competitions.
They're challenging the 5-year financial determination. So you've got Ofwat sat there with a finite amount of resources, but you've got these great big companies like Thames Water, United Utilities, Severn Trent, Yorkshire Water, all really big, and they've got huge amounts of resources. They've got teams that are probably as big as Ofwat's and bigger.
Yeah.
And then they've got external consultants that will come in, KPMG and all those types of people, to put together really clever arguments for why they should have more and why they're being impoverished. Yeah. And it was always the way. It was always a sort of a bit of a horse trading thing. Well, the companies at the 5-year financial reviews would plead poverty. Like, it's really difficult for us. And then the next thing you'd see is, the chief exec's got a couple of £1 million in bonus.
Yeah. And do you think the campaigners, do you think they'll ever be happy? Not just necessarily on campaigning about the structure or nationalisation, but then on the quality. And there's always a degree of unhappiness about it all. And it doesn't matter what happens. A lot of these people are the same people that campaigned a couple of years ago for the higher transparency on sewage discharges. That's just armed them with more information to do more. Do you think they'll ever be happy? Is it more of an ideological battle which a lot of them are fighting?
Well, I think,
and it's not actually about the health and safety element, it's about because it's privatised. Where do you think the balance lies?
I think that's a good question. I think with those environmental campaigners, I think it's in their interest to never be happy. If they say, oh wait a minute, it's 2026, I think we've reached a point where the water industry's done such a lot of good stuff, or it's 2030. Yeah, they've delivered on their promises, and I'm downing tools. I'm not going to campaign anymore. That it's always in their interest to be dissatisfied. That being said, I do think at the moment they've got an awful lot of legitimate complaints to go at because the infrastructure doesn't work properly. The weather is not helping. The population growth is another factor. There's tests that you can do in the rivers that show contaminants that shouldn't be there, and then you've got the big bonuses going out and everything else.
It's like a perfect storm.
It is. But I think that there are models around the world that are quite interesting to look at. So the Wanganui River in New Zealand, near where my mum lives, it has actually been it's been legally given a personality. Like it's a living, breathing entity, which actually it is. But it legally it's got a rights, and I'm sure the people that act on its behalf, will sort of. It's sort of like been personified, if you like. So its legal status is that which allows lawsuits to be brought if there's environmental pollution or whatever into that river, which is a really interesting way of looking at it. It sounds kind of like a bit wacky, but there's another river I think called the Yarra in Australia where that's happened as well, and it's the community, it's a local thing which is very much fighting for the environment, and actually that has to be a good thing, because if the environment's a dirty mess, then the product that the water companies take out of that environment, it's not going to be as good potentially. So it really does. It sounds like a trite sort of soundbite, but actually, if these water companies look after the environment, then
the environment will look after them.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So, but yeah. What would we do here? I think another factor that's worth pointing out as well is only 0.2% of the world's water are in rivers. Okay. Yeah. There are obviously the ocean's quite big, but there's still a hell of a lot of water in rivers and in groundwater sources. So, it's looking after them is so important, I guess, because there's such a small amount of water in there, and that we rely so heavily on it. It really underlines case for looking after the problem. And there's people who are a lot brighter and cleverer than I am to do this, but I think there are really interesting organisations in the UK at the moment, particularly one called UK Water Industry Research, which is a lesser known organisation, which is doing some amazing impartial research into flooding, droughts, combined sewer overflows, sustainable urban drainage, and really digging down into the data and trying to give policymakers the impartial facts and allow them to make informed decisions on what we do in future. Because pouring concrete is one option, but if you wanted to, say, separate the wastewater, so like the runoff from rain, from the combined sewer system that we've got. So in Britain, there's sewers which take the stuff you flush down the loo plus whatever rains on the street and washes into them. It's a combined system, largely. There are elements that are separated, but largely it's combined. Separating them would cost anywhere up to 600 billion pounds. And in order to prevent any sewage overflows into the environment ever again, you'd have to pour huge amounts of concrete, mainly around the coasts and the rivers, to create tanks, holding tanks, for when like the big heavy downpour, the storm has passed. And so do we really want that? Do we want to be living in what looks like a sort of Second World War bunker as a whole country? Probably not. So there's a balance to strike, and there's things like sustainable urban drainage, nature-based solutions which allow, when there's heavy rain, for it to soak away before it even enters the sewer network. So stuff like that. I mean, it's a really complex problem, and organisations like Ofwat are trying to bring like impartial knowledge on it. And
from a political point of view now, we're at the part of the process where obviously a big announcement's been made. They're going to go through all the reorganisation. There's going to be a water reform bill coming up in Parliament. That's going to take a year or so, isn't it? So this is going to become a real big political hot potato, as it were. It's going to be in the news more often. There's actually going to be more crunch points coming along on votes and amendments and more lobbying, not only from the big water companies, but from all these campaign groups as well. So this is an emerging topic again. This is going to probably dominate a lot of the space in the environmental political arena. So going forward, this is actually going to be a big topic for people to explore further, look into, and maybe another topic for us to go over with a guest speaker in the future as well.
Yeah, I reckon. It's kind of depressing when you hear Jon Cunliffe say, right, we need a super regulator, and everyone sort of reacts as though, oh, it's in place already. Well, no, it's not. It's going to be years of parliamentary time and law making and bills passing from one area of the house to the other, blah blah blah. You know the process only too well. So it's going to be 2-3 years before this thing emerges, and then customer expectation will be really high on that super regulator, whatever it gets called. So this problem's not going away, and then in the meantime you've got probably even more unpredictable weather patterns, more extreme weather. You've got population growth, nudging up. All of the fundamental problems which have led to where we are going to keep creeping across these years. So it's interesting. That being said, this 5-year period, so 2025 to 2030, there's going to be more investment in water, which is leading to the historic biggest rise in bills, household bills, that we've ever had. That will allow 100 billion to be spent in the sector. 44 billion of that is on new investment, so new bits of kit, treatment plants and what have you. So there's more investment than ever before, but I think the problem is that there's been historic underinvestment and controversial. Water bills should be higher than they are. And it's just if we pay...
You can tell you'll never be a politician because you'll never knock a door and say that to someone.
Yeah, but it's true. Water bills, they're less than £2 a day for all the water you can drink and all of it being treated and returned to the environment. Whereas we're happy to pay more than three times more on average for power. Now, I'm being deliberately a bit provocative here, but if you lose your power to your house, you can put jumpers on. I'm not saying people get cold in the winter, that's a terrible thing, and heating and everything else, that's important. But if if your power gets knocked off, you put a jumper on, you get a candle, and you can just about cope. The water, if your water gets cut off, that's a real problem. You can't survive without water. It's more essential to life, and yet we pay a third of the price for it. So I think accepting that we should be paying more for bills, and then the regulator's job, I think, in the future would be making, in some way, getting a better handle on the control of these water companies, which are monopolies. So they should not be allowed to chuck great big bonuses around. There should be a lot better policing of that. How that happens, I don't know. It's for people who are way brighter than you and me to figure out. But
well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of debate on it as this goes forward as well, because this, like I said, isn't going to go away anytime soon. This is going to dominate the political space for a while. So I'm sure we've given everyone a good synopsis of where everything is, where we can try and go into the future. Walk through walls, obviously, we're always looking at new ways in which to engage with different companies. A new regulatory framework is only going to mean that people are going to have to get used to a new way of doing. How do they want it to be shaped? How do they want it to try and be influenced? And then also the politics of it all. Where does it go? There's obviously in Scotland there's going to be a big thing with the SNP. They always try and push it a bit further, edge along the UK government. Labour are going to have to, now they're in power, start balancing the difference between what they can say in opposition and what they have said in opposition, all the way through to what's actually practically possible. So this debate's going to go on for quite a while.
And obviously your specialism, Gary, now you're an ex-parliamentarian, is navigating that political landscape, walking through the walls that exist and helping people navigate that space. And my sort of specialism is the storytelling. And I think you combine those things, there's a need for the water sector to be more confident and better at telling its story about the relationship with returning sewage to the environment, which happens, and then they're better at telling the story of, if a private investor invests in your private company, they expect a return, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to be secretive or ashamed of that, and it's that confidence to just get on the front foot, tell the story. But between now and that time, there's a whole lot of damage limitation and rebuilding of trust to happen, because the trust has been eroded so severely. But it feels like a bit like a combined sewer overflow. I in particular have been venting a lot of opinions this session, but I think
so there's only one thing left to do, and that's to quench our thirst and have a glass of water. Cheers.
This has been Talk Through Walls.
We've walked through walls.
We've walked through walls. Cheers.
There we go.